Hello, this is Blair from Yellow Mount Custard here with a new segment I like to put on the blog, maybe start it up, and it's called Blair's Rants. Fuck! And here, Blair's Rants, I like to talk about anything that, I have an opinion about, anything I like to spew upon you. The thing I'm going to talk about for my rant is, overprotective fans. Now, as you all know, I'm a rabid fan of the Beatles, but in saying that, there's not that much Beatles on Yellow Matter Custard. Obviously, I took the name Yellow Matter Custard from a line in I Am the Walrus by the Beatles. But the reason behind that is I feel like, someone coming to the blog isn't going to find anything new in the Beatles. I think it's safe to say that mostly everybody knows and heard of the Beatles. So, I had to show my different tastes than Beatles. I think the title and the overall spirit of the blog says enough about their music that I don't have to bash you over the head with constant Beatles, related posts. So, yeah. So, like I said, this is going to be about overprotective fans. What that means is, like I said, I'm a big fan of the Beatles. They're my favorite band of all time. But, I always notice when I go on, Beatles forums, and, places like that, like forums where you can talk about things and share your opinions with people like that, on the Beatles. It's like the people, they think they know the Beatles as people, you know what I mean? Like, I see a lot of 14-year-old girls, pretending like they knew John Lennon even though he died 10 years, 12, 13, 14 years before they were born, and, they're it's kind of annoying, whenever someone asks me who my favorite Beatle is, I always say Ringo. For a number of reasons. Being that the first instrument I ever played was the drums. Drummers in bands have always been my favorite, usually. It's been like that with the Beatles, with Ringo, with The Who, with Keith Moon, John Bonham and Led Zeppelin, Neil Peart and Rush. Goes on. But it changes, It changes with different bands. That's one aspect of it, I'm always a sucker for the drummer of the band. And, Ringo was the perfect fit for the Beatles. Was he the most talented Beatle? No. No, he wasn't. Was he the least talented? No. There was no least talented Beatle. Was he the least popular? No, there's no least popular Beatle. I remember just the other day at work, someone asked me who my favorite Beatle was, and I said Ringo, and they're like, oh, well, he's the least popular Beatle. I said, the fuck's that supposed to mean? What's the least popular Beatle? They're the Beatles. You think John, Paul, George, and Ringo, you don't say, who? Ringo? Who's Ringo? You hear Ringo, you think Ringo. You hear Lennon, John Lennon, McCartney, Paul McCartney, Harrison, George Harrison. There's no least popular Beatle. Also, another aspect of it is that he is the only member of the Beatles that I think, if all four of them were still alive, I think that Ringo would be the only Beatle I would like to hang out with. Now, Beatles fans everywhere are shitting their pants and pulling their fucking hair out right now. But hear me out. These are my theories on why Ringo would be the only Beatle I'd like to hang out with. He's humble. He's nice. He seems nice. He's just a normal, down-to-earth guy. Paul, I don't know about Paul. Paul seems very, I don't know, watching the anthology the first time, the documentary on the Beatles from 1995, I tended to side with Paul, you know. But after reading about their history a lot more, and then watching it again, it seems like he bullshits a lot. He won't take any responsibility for things that he might have done that were the wrong choices, like, you know, the Apple store idea and the Apple company idea, which was jointly his and John's, but, you know, he didn't take any responsibility for it, you know, disbanding or disintegrating when the rest of them did. He also doesn't take much responsibility for the way he treated Yoko, which, who cares, really? She's Yoko. But, I mean, all joking aside about Yoko is that you don't fuck with a man's woman. You don't try to get between a guy and the girl he loves. You just don't do that. So, you know, obviously, him and John knew each other since they were teenagers. They were in the biggest band ever, and here comes this skinny, beautiful, sorry, interesting looking woman named Yoko Ono. And, sorry, something happened there. And she comes waltzing in, and, you know, then John changes. And that's, of course, it's gonna hurt and piss off any normal guy. But you don't try to get in between them. And I think Paul did that, but I don't think he really owns up to that. That's why I wouldn't want to hang out with Paul, because he seems like he just bullshits a lot. George is at least one I say I wouldn't want to hang out with. It just seems he's boring. He seemed like he was a boring guy. It seemed like all he talked about was this fucking Indian stuff, which is awesome. I love Indian music, and I love mythology behind Hinduism, but, you know, if I met George Harrison, I'd want to play guitar with him or jam with him. I wouldn't want to, you know, meditate with him all day. So, but the biggest one, John. John seemed like a prick. He seemed like one of the biggest assholes ever. 1970, the year the Beatles officially broke up, he had an interview with Jan Wenner, who was a prick too, in Rolling Stone magazine, which sucks, about the Beatles, and he talked a lot of shit about Paul and Ringo and George, and he basically said that, you know, George's All Things Must Pass album wasn't very good, and George wasn't a very good guitar player, and, you know, bullshit that, you know, he said later that he didn't mean a lot of it, but, you know, can't take it back once it's published. So, yeah, he just seems like he was just a prick. You know, a great musician, a great lyricist, but I think he'd be a bit hot-headed. And also, you know, he didn't fucking go anywhere without Yoko after 1968. So that would be a problem, too. But the fans, I read on the forums, they act like the Beatles are gods. They're not. They were four guys who made the best music that's ever been released in the history of music. That's my opinion. You know, some people might think that, you know, Beethoven or Mozart or Bach is, you know, that's the common, you know, theory, is that the best music ever made has been, you know, the classical music or jazz or whatever, you know. But my opinion, the Beatles, they were it. But they are not gods. They were guys. They were humans like us. They had the same, you know, they had hair, eyes, gutty works, you know. They had hearts and organs and stuff, you know. They didn't come from the sky and, you know, said, we are going to give you music. They were just four guys who happened to write, the greatest songs, So like these bands who go on about like, if you don't think that Paul, John, George, and Ringo were the greatest four people who ever lived, that you're not a real fan. That pisses me off, because they're the greatest band ever, but that doesn't mean them as people were good, because, John did charity work, but at the same time he said a lot of shit that was hurtful to people, Paul does lots of good stuff, I guess. I don't really know. I don't follow him much. He smokes pot, though, so kind of makes him a loser. Ringo was a raging alcoholic in the 70s. I'm not trying to pass judgment on them, but I'm saying that they're immortal, Proves that they're immortal. They had problems. They had vices, like everybody. Like any band, not just the Beatles. I'm just using the Beatles as an example because they're my favorite band, and they're the ones I see most used in this way, like saying, "Oh, they're gods and they're great, and I want to marry John Lennon." He's dead. He's been dead since 1980. It's time to get over it. Mark David Chapman. We've heard it. He's in jail. He's not gonna get out. He's gonna die in jail, like he deserves. But let's not dwell on it. Let's listen to their music. Let's remember John from Strawberry Fields Forever, or I'm the Walrus, or I Want You, She's So Heavy, whatever. Not because he got shot and I wish he was still alive. Who cares? If all four Beatles were still alive, they wouldn't be the Beatles. They wouldn't have gotten back together. It would have never happened. So there's no reason to keep jacking off to that idea that, if they're all alive, then the Beatles would reunite. And plus, in all respect, Paul is still going strong, and I've seen concerts on DVDs and stuff, and he's fucking great for his age, but he's not as good as he was. He doesn't sound as good as in the Beatles days or the Wings days, and that's the problem. There's too many of these middle-aged or senior citizen rockers that are trying to capture their past glory, and they sound like shit. I saw Bob Dylan live. This is going to sound like blasphemy. I saw Bob Dylan live about 2008. And, when I saw him, and like a couple weeks after I saw him, the glow and the craziness of, oh my god, I fucking saw Bob Dylan, was there. But then after a while, I realized that he wasn't very good live. He didn't sound like Bob Dylan. He didn't sound like I wanted him to sound, and that's the problem. You can't expect him to sound like you want, but at the same time, you expect him. I know I expected him to go, that stuff, but he's almost 70 now, and it's good that he's still singing and he's still writing new music. But it was disappointing, and that's the problem, is that people are like, oh, they should reunite, and they should get back together. Just listen to the music. Listen to the music that's been. There are some artists who are old, who can still go. The Rolling Stones, I saw the Rolling Stones in 2006. They don't sound as good, but they still have the energy that they used to have. Mick Jagger still does his thing, Keith Richards still kind of does his wobbly thing that can't really tell if he's really there or not. But they're only in for the money, anymore. So they're not really a good example. Neil Young still sounds like Neil Young. Bruce Springsteen still sounds like Bruce Springsteen. He still looks like Bruce Springsteen. He looks fucking great for his age. He looks like he's only in his 40s, but he's in his 60s. But there's very few and far between. There are exceptions to the matter. Usually, there's other bands, like, I don't know. I don't want to say any bands could piss anybody off, but there are bands that I love that would reunite later, to do like a 40th anniversary thing, and there's no point, they sound like shit. They look old. you know, they don't have the long hair and the bell bottoms or the tie-dye and the scarves, whatever, you know, whatever era they came from. You know, they just look like old farts. You know, they sound like old farts. They sound like, you know, middle-aged guys getting together, you know, after work or after a retirement party, coming back together and meeting each other again and saying, hey, wouldn't it be fun to do covers of our favorite band? That's what it sounds like to me. So, you know, but all these fans are like, oh, we've got to get back together, oh, please. Stupid. I don't know anymore. I kind of got off topic. Yeah. I kind of had a theme, but I was kind of going off tangents, but I stayed pretty... I don't know, but that's all I have to say. I'm not very good with these things, as you can tell. I do these in one take, you see. So I'm just talking off the top of my head. I don't have it scripted or anything. So I'm just using my brain as it goes. That's why I say stupid stuff a lot. That doesn't make sense, because my brain sometimes doesn't work right. But anyways, that's all I have to say. Expect another rant.